My name is Diana, and I'm going to start off by asking you guys to close your eyes for me. Reflect on your life exactly how it is right now. Reflect on your personality, your parents, your friends, and your education. Now, with that picture in mind, I'm going to just change one thing in this equation. You were born into a family that your parents aren't considered to be traditional. They have the same genes as before, they just developed different habits. Your father is an alcoholic. He spends most of his free time downing copious amounts of Jack Daniels and arguing with your mother. As for your mom, she spends most of her free time feeding her new crystal meth addiction and worrying about how she's going to pay for the rent and her next fix. You may open your eyes. Now, a question for the class. With your parents' identical genes, but different living environments, do you believe you would still have the same personality, friend group, and education as you do right now? Well, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, a government-run agency that focuses on the health of Americans, 80% of 21-year-olds who reported childhood maltreatment met the criteria for at least one psychological disorder. How does that make you guys feel? Well, today I will be challenging the controversy of do inherited traits or life experiences play a greater role in shaping who you are. I will be discussing topics discussing physical and emotional development and whether nature versus nurture plays a greater role. Many of us are planning on having kids one day, right? So if you listen to my speech, by the end of it, you will know the factors that are influencing development and the steps you can take to take proper action when it comes to raising your own child. The topics we'll be discussing today are, can nature versus nurture affect your behavior? Does violence simply just run in the family? Do IQ scores change over time? Will our society get any smarter, or dumber for that matter? Can nature versus nurture affect your weight? Do environmental factors cause obesity? Now that you know we'll be talking about behavior, intelligence, and weight on nature versus nurture, we're going to go on to the effects on behavior. The following was composed by a group of researchers from the University of Nebraska, in which they specialize their studies in having to do with abuse and psychological development. Criminals carry the warrior gene, which embeds violence and aggression into their DNA. It's a common misconception. While a 36% reduction in criminal offending in the kids who participated in an enrichment program. To explain the study, they took a group of 3-year-olds, half of which received a 2-year enrichment program with better nutrition, better education, and more physical activity per day. They compared this to a non-control group. They followed these kids until they were 23 years old and found that the control group had a 36% reduction in criminal offending compared to the non-control group. Another misconception is that exposure to violence does not cause violent behavior. While it is 5 times more likely for abused children to commit criminal offenses. Finally, intelligence is strictly determined by the genes from your parents. While a study found a 4 IQ point average increase between siblings raised by adoptive parents versus biological parents. To explain this study, they took 400 pairs of siblings. One went to the adoptive parent, one went to the biological parent, and then they compared their IQ scores and found a 4 IQ point increase. Now that you know how aggression, criminals, and intelligence is influenced by nurturing factors, we're going to move on to do IQ scores change over time? The following information comes from the Association of Psychological Sciences, an organization run by psychological scientists that focus on a research outlook and a global. This one discussed average change in global IQ scores. They started in 1980 and made their way to 2020 and found an average of a 3-point IQ increase within the decades. The researchers said that the reason for this increase is due to environmental factors, better nutrition, better education, more exposure to visual and technological advances, such as with the internet, advertisements, and movies. So now that you know that intelligence is increased due to richer environmental factors, we're going to move on to stories having to do with nature and weight. The following information also comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which is a government-run agency that focuses on the health of Americans. 78.4% of parents of obese children believe them to be just right. This little girl is Honey Boo Boo. She got famous from a TLC TV show, Toddlers and Tiaras. There was a scandal where her dad was like, you know, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to lose some weight. While her mom ironically said, That is the most ignorant thing I've heard in my life. I would never tell my daughter to do that. This is one case of many where parents are in denial of their child being overweight, and it's seriously affecting their weight and their eating habits. Another study found 96% of high-income families, at least one parent reported that they regularly declined their child of junk food, while only 13% decline in low-income families. After the researchers talked to these families, they found that the high-income families declined the junk food due to health reasons and wanting their kid to develop more healthy eating habits, while low-income families had a different opinion on food. They said that because they regularly decline their child of things like getting new shoes, going to Disney World, doing things that they can't afford, whenever their child comes up to them to ask them for a bag of chips or candy, something that they can afford, they use that as a way of showing their love and affection, and that they can actually afford something and give their child something that they want. And this can also explain why obesity rates are much higher in low-income families compared to high-income families. After hearing my speech and hearing these stories, it's not crazy to assume that nurture plays a greater role in shaping who you are. So, who will pass on this information this week to friends and parents and encourage them to be the best helicopter parents they can be and give their child everything that they ask for? Well, if that's too much, who will pass on this information this week to friends and future parents and encourage them to provide their child with an environment filled with better love, health, and education to enhance their development? And if you don't want to do this, who will at least conduct more research on their own this week on the importance of nurture in a child's development? Show of hands, please. Thank you very much.